I've been laid off 4 times in my career. My first layoff was in the spring of 2001, and my fourth layoff was in summer 2023. The first layoff was very different than the way I dealt with it. The first layoff, it took me years to recover from. My last layoff, it was like water off a duck's back. I had learned a set of skills that allowed me to cope and manage the stages of grief after job loss. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, reconstruction, renewal. A layoff is not a roadblock, it's a detour. Here's what you're going to feel. Here's how to get through it.
Hey there, it's Sindy Thomas, former hiring expert and now career coach and strategist. Today, we're diving into a topic that most professionals have faced, but they rarely talk about openly, and that is the emotional journey of a layoff. I'm joined today by Steve Jaffe. He is the author of The Layoff Journey, From Dismissal to Recovery, Navigating the Stages of Grief and Loss After a Job Loss. Now, a layoff isn't just the loss of a paycheck. It's the loss of stability, your identity, and routine. It's deeply personal and is an upheaval to your life, one that triggers the same emotional responses as other major life transitions. Steve has navigated the emotional and practical challenges of career transitions firsthand. He guides readers in his book through the 7 stages of grief. The book offers a roadmap to navigate the emotional terrain of job loss with clarity and purpose. Let's welcome him into the show. It's going to be great. Stay tuned. Steve, welcome into the Insiders Career Club podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I've been looking forward to this conversation because the topic is very timely. We're both in the SF Bay Area, and a lot of people have lost their jobs around here, especially with Silicon Valley going through its growing pains with shifting more towards AI. And a lot of people have been laid off. Even though new jobs have been created, they're ones that these people may not be qualified for. So before we get into more of that, let me just ask you, when did you decide that you wanted to write the book, The Layoff Journey?
Yeah, good question. So I've been laid off 4 times in my career over about 25, 30 years. My first layoff was in the spring of 2001, and my fourth layoff was in summer 2023.
Okay.
The way I dealt with the first layoff was very different than the way I dealt with it. The first layoff, it took me years to recover from. My last layoff, it was like water off a duck's back. And what I realized was over the course of those 25 years and 4 layoffs, I had learned a set of skills that allowed me to cope and manage the stages of grief after job loss in a way that it didn't hold me back in the same way. I navigated it in a way that I was able to move on and move through it fairly quickly. And I thought, there are so many people that are being affected by layoffs. Perhaps others could use this same roadmap, this practical guide to getting through this difficult experience. And I had always wanted to write a book. I just didn't quite have the subject matter. And in that summer of 2023, as I was thinking about what I was going to do next, it came to me and said, you know what, this would be a good book to write. Perhaps there's some help that you could offer others. And that's what I've been doing. I think it has helped some people. So many of the other books in the space tend to move straight to, if you've been laid off, here's how you update your resume. Here's how you do job interviews. There aren't any books that talk about the grief, that middle stage of what to do before you update your resume, before you go on the job interview. And I think it's important. I think it's worth giving people a place that they feel accepted and that acknowledges the grief that comes from a layoff.
Yeah, especially for the first one, right? Because you can be sailing along in your career and things are going well, and then all of a sudden you're laid off and you've never had to deal with that. And as you say, from your first experience with being laid off to the last, I mean, it just kind of didn't phase you. These days, layoffs are commonplace, but I can imagine maybe you were laid off maybe around the same time I was the first time, and mine goes way back to 90s, right? 1990s. And I was like, "What? I'm laid off?" Now, I worked for a non-for-profit then, so I kinda realized if you don't have money, of course, we're all gonna be laid off. There were no survivors to that, but it made me feel much better when they called me back months later to hire me back because they found funding. So you kinda realize in that kind of a situation, it wasn't you, it really was the money, but that's not always the case these days.
Yeah, I tend to counsel folks to not read too much more into the layoff than
No.
the budget exercise. By and large, most layoffs come from the company trying to redirect funds from salaries and headcount to the bottom line. Any of those tangential reasons, it's not healthy to go down that road. You're not going to get really any answers one way or
No,
another
you're
if
not.
that's really true or not.
You're not.
So oftentimes you can spin yourself up on that hamster wheel of, well, what was the real motivation? Why did they really let me go? Was it something I did? Was it something I said? Was it something about me? And it's kind of a losing battle.
Yes.
It's yeah. You can wrap a lot of emotions up in that
Yeah, you can
none
attack
of
a
which
lot
are
of
healthy.
things. I agree. In your book, you frame job loss through the lens of the stages of grief. Why do you feel these stages are so important for people to understand?
Well, so the stages of grief were created by a wonderful behavioral research scientist in the 40s, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She was observing terminally ill patients as they were passing through their late life stages, and also observing their friends and loved ones. And she found that they were all experiencing this same process of managing the grief. And in time, it's been learned that any difficult life experience, any traumatic life experience, as human beings, we tend to process it in a very similar way. And certainly a layoff is one of those traumatic life experiences. So the 7 stages include denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, reconstruction, and renewal. And it's very common after a layoff to feel those things. And it should give somebody some sense of security, knowing that there is a process. There's a known way of understanding how your body emotionally, physiologically will process what you've just been through. And the first 4 stages are difficult: denial, anger, bargaining, and depression. There's some heavy lifting there that's done emotionally. Um, but the last 3 is like a light at the end of the tunnel where you find the acceptance and the reconstruction and ultimately the renewal to move on and to move forward. And it's a great way to come out of this in a way where you're ready for those job interviews. You're ready to be asked the question, tell me about yourself. Tell me why you left your last job. Tell me
Mhm.
why you were laid off. If you're stuck in denial or anger or depression, those are going to be difficult questions to answer.
Really,
Come to
mhm.
terms with them and you've accepted the situation for what it is, you'll be much better positioned for success. So it's something that I found after my 4 layoffs, when I discovered these stages of grief, I really identified with them and recognized how I moved through them.
Mhm. Okay. Can you discuss a couple of ways to cope with some of the feelings that people are feeling? I know that you mentioned mindful meditation or counting your blessings. I know Oprah talks about gratitude journals. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Not to come across as like a real toxic positive person, but there is a benefit to having a gratitude practice. Look, a layoff, a lot of things have been taken from you. You've had your salary, your source of income, you've had your health care, your health insurance. If you're an immigrant, you've had your visa taken. You've
True
had your
enough.
community, your friends, your routine, a sense of what brings you joy and purpose in life.
Mhm.
A lot of things have been taken from you. It's very easy to get caught up in a negative cycle on ruminating over those things that have been taken.
Mhm.
Finding the things that you can still be grateful for, in spite of that, is a good way to rewire your brain to seeing the glass being half full rather than half empty. But I think one of the most effective ways to move through the stages of grief is to simply acknowledge what you're feeling. Check in with yourself daily, name the emotion that you're feeling without judgment, and letting grief move through you, instead of trying to push it down or move past it. Give yourself the permission to feel what you're feeling.
No.
A layoff triggers a full body stress response. So healthy coping means releasing that energy through movement, exercise, creative outlets before it turns into anxiety, depression, or burnout. You know, in the exercise and getting out, getting some fresh air, doing there's a release of serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin, all
Mhm.
really healthy ways that your body releases chemicals to counteract and counterbalance depression and some of those emotions and emotional releases physiologically. So the recovery accelerates what feels like a sense of control. It gives you back your strength, your ownership in putting you back in the driver's seat. So finding clarity, reframing the layoff as a reset. One of the things that I stress is a layoff is not a roadblock, it's a detour. So finding the ability to move through it and move past it in a way that it doesn't define you, it doesn't become your singular narrative or the story that you tell yourself. You haven't failed. The company has failed you. Uh,
Mhm.
you shouldn't feel shame or embarrassment over the layoff. It was simply a budget exercise done by the company to save money and nothing more than that. And you shouldn't give it any more oxygen than that. It's important to frame it and understand it in a way that doesn't take control of your self-esteem.
Mhm. Take some blame that you might be doing, blaming yourself. "Oh, I should have done this, I should have done that," off of you. I do find it powerful if you accept, the way that you are feeling, that you acknowledge it, feel it, and go through, because if you don't accept it, you're gonna stay stuck, right? That's, one of the ways that is harmful to you, to stay in denial that this isn't really happening. So, yeah, I do like the fact that you talk about acceptance. And that's true actually for all things in life, right? It's not just about layoffs. It's this is happening to me, whatever may be happening in your personal life, you accept it and realize what's going on, allow yourself to feel that way and you can move on. How can you somehow people get stuck though? So how can is that the only or the best mechanism for people to stay unstuck is to acknowledge and release and go through the process? Yeah. Are there any other mechanisms that people can use if they may not even feel stuck, but once they realize it, things that they can do to get themselves unstuck?
Well, one of the things that can trip people up is they start this backward looking sort of questioning of the
Mhm.
experience and
Mhm.
questioning, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? Why me? And like I said, you're never going to get the answers to those questions. And they're only going to put you in a negative loop in your thinking, right? So if you can reframe those questions to why me? Why now? And think about that in terms of what's next. How do I come out the other side of this in a way that positions me for success? What do I take from this experience that I can learn from and apply that going forward? So if you spend your time thinking about, okay, did I like that career path that I was on? Did it bring me joy? Did I find it fulfilling? Was it in line with my passions and my values?
Mhm.
If not, what would be in alignment with my passions and values? What would bring me joy? This can open up the opportunity for a pivot in your career. It can open up an opportunity for some reskilling, some upskilling. It can offer an opportunity to find what the transferable skills are that you have that would make you still relevant to the job market. Certainly now, the jobs are being eliminated because of technological advances, because of increased competition. If you try and stay on the career path that you're on, you may end up just getting laid off again because that industry is experiencing contraction. You may need to find a new industry where growth is occurring, and you may need to repackage your skills or find other ways to make yourself relevant. Uh, this is the time to do that, and we rarely have that opportunity when we're working, long hours at our current jobs. Uh,
Mhm.
a layoff can give you the pause and the break to do some reflection and
Yeah.
redirection. Um, those are all the ways to use this in a healthy way. Try not to give the experience too much more oxygen other than it looked at my salary on an Excel spreadsheet and they needed to take my salary and put it to the bottom line because there was a budget exercise they were trying to make a number on. Um, Ultimately, that's what most layoffs come down to. And if you're questioning, you can always ask, am I eligible for rehire? More often than not, they'll say yes. And you can take that with you to the hiring manager at the next job and say, listen, the company was undergoing reductions due to a budget situation. I'm eligible for rehire. I left on good terms and leave it at that.
I like that. The whole reframing, and it tends to come down to perspective, right? Yeah, it's all about your perspective. It's all about the way that you're looking at things and taking them in. So that's a key point for people to realize. And then also that they need to be around people that are positive. You
Yeah.
know, people that aren't gonna say, "Well, you got laid off. I knew you were gonna get laid off. You weren't going, you weren't doing this, you weren't doing that." Stay away from those people, the negative Nellies. You don't need their energy in your space. It's only gonna bring your bullet.
Really important you surround yourself with people that support you.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's also good to surround yourself with other people that are going through the same thing because you have that sense of camaraderie and someone may suggest something to you that you didn't think of. Oh, I think I'll try that. But I do like the refocusing piece that you talked about because it's true that especially the way that work is now, employment is now with whatever company you're working with, people are doing the work of 2 or 3 jobs, and you're so busy, you very often don't focus in on your career, and you may just be staying there because it is a job and a paycheck, and it allows you to do something else. So the fact that you may wanna take a look at where I might want to go is one, but is this career going to be sustainable for the future with the changes that are happening with technology? Are my skills something that are going to keep me employable? Because a lot of people need to reskill. And it's not like big reskilling. You may not want to go into technology itself, but you do want to be familiar with the different types of technologies that are being used. And it's not so much that you have to go to school to learn, you just need to learn it. Chat GPT, all those prompts can be either verbal or, you're writing them in. It's based on the English language. It's not like you have to learn code, right? You just have to learn the way to query it in the right way to get some of the answers and solutions that you need. So it's just exposing yourself to the technologies that can be used to enhance the work that you've been doing or to learn other technology applications that will help you for whatever job you're planning on. Or maybe not. There are a lot of people that are doing the reverse and going into trades because they know electricians and plumbers and people that do those that kind of work, more manual labor, are always going to be in demand. So it's a way of looking at it. And then there are other like you were mentioning too, there are other industries that are new that are sustainability industries, environmental industries that are based on what's going on with our environments. Those things are really coming to the forefront. And for people in technology, there may be other industries that you might want to switch to, like teachers, the education system. People need to be trained. And, there are industries like that, professions like that are going to be in great demand. Some industries won't feel it so much, but you will, or professions won't feel it so much, but you will need to be familiar with the technology because it's only growing. I mean, I'm using more of it now in my own business, help me set some things up. So it's fantastic because it's so fast and so thorough. Somewhere I read that Chat GPT has the equivalent of engineering degree, all these different professions, lawyer, yeah, all of it. And that's where it's gaining its knowledge from, along with the prompts that we're putting in. So it's doing its continual learning. So you kind of have to change your mindset, the way that you are looking at a profession and staying viable and kind of staying in tune with what's going on.
Yeah, all good advice.
Many people underestimate how much their identity is tied into the work that they do. How does a job loss disrupt a person's sense of self?
Yeah, God,
Whole another area that we haven't talked about yet.
that's such a good question. In our society, it's common for somebody to say, "So tell me what you do. Like, what do you do?" And
Mhm.
if you meet them, as if like your job title and the place that you work is some sort of representation of who you are as this whole person. It's become like this shorthand that we've all become accustomed to using. And that becomes our identity. So our job title and the place that we work can, in some instances, become who we are. At times, people might not have a really robust life outside of work. Oftentimes we're at work and with the people we work with more than our family. Very rarely do people have a healthy work life balance. So, a lot gets tied up in what we do and what's printed on our business card.
Mhm.
And when that gets taken away, we're left with a big hole to fill. It's why after my first layoff, I recognized this very thing. I recognized I didn't really have much going on outside of work. I didn't have much of a personal life, right? My personal life was with all of the people that I worked with. I was there most of the time. I didn't explore any personal interests or hobbies. By the time I had my fourth layoff, I had built a pretty robust life outside of work. So that when the job was taken, I still had my whole person that I was, and I didn't have as much tied up into it. And I think what's important is people need to recognize the transferable skills that you own that the employer can't ever take away from you. So let's say, for example, someone who's a vice president of marketing at Kellogg's, right? Like that can be a very reductive definition of who they are. But if you lose that job, you no longer have that title. What are you? Well, what are your transferable skills? Transferable skills are I have 25 years of marketing experience, a leading consumer packaged goods manufacturer, right? That tells a similar story absent any ownership that somebody else might have over your story.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
like, taking ownership over your narrative and your story is really important, and understanding what you bring to the table, regardless of what's printed on the business card, is really important.
It's true. You have to know your value, and that is a sum total of your experiences. But it comes down to being able to point that out. Let's use your example. Your VP of marketing. If you're a VP, you're a people manager. You're managing projects, you're managing budgets. All of those things are transferable skills, right? And there's so much more. You can talk about, whatever specific projects you had. That would be not just marketing, but it's a project management, and you're taking those project management skills to whoever you're interviewing with. So, I mean, there are lots of skills that people don't even realize that they have. And same with accomplishments. They don't think, oh, yeah, I did that, but it's an accomplishment. And you need to point that out. You need to think about it. And I think one of the setbacks of our society is it's always the, what have you done for me lately? And you don't take the time to acknowledge your wins. It's like, oh, yeah, you did it great. Now let's move on to the next project. But they don't give you even time to reflect about it. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that individuals don't think about so much of what did I accomplish, because it's like here, gone and done, and we've moved on, and you just don't feel, it's not something that you think about all the time. So, I mean, there's lots of value in what you do. You just have to pull it out, and that's one of the things I do as a coach, right? I'm helping people see those value, the accomplishments, the things that they did that are the transferable skills, that are the wins for them, and helping them package that into a story that is going to really represent the value that they have.
Yeah.
If they
Yeah.
weren't,
That's important work. A lot of people need that service right now.
yeah, they do. Let's talk about finance management. And I know that depending on when you're laid off, you don't have a whole lot of control over what you may have spent. But what you can do is make sure that your life is set up in a way that if you think it might happen, you can put some safeguards into place. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is important. This is one of the things that I tell people when you've been laid off. One of the first things that you should do is take a look at your finances. It will give you peace of mind to then process these emotions in a way where you feel like you have the right amount of time necessary. So, looking at what your runway is, what do you have in your savings? Where do you have expenses that you might want or need to cut back from?
Uh-huh.
What, if any, sources of income do you have? Understanding, getting a really clear picture of how much runway you have will also help you when you're on the job hunt. So you know what your timeline is for how long you could go without getting a paycheck. Doing this exercise may also help you in the severance package negotiations. So let's say you may have some good amount of savings put away, but healthcare is a really important thing that you need to bridge. You might want to negotiate healthcare as part of your severance. It may be in lieu of a severance payout. Getting the financial picture will put you at a place of knowledge and control that may help you in the severance negotiations. I do think that, a few years ago, the timeline for rehire was probably on average 6 months. Today, it's probably closer to 9 to 12 months. So if you think you might get laid off, I suggest putting away some savings that you'll be able to carry for potentially 9 to 12 months of unemployment.
Yeah, yeah. It used to be you used to have example used to be have at least 6 months, right? Have at least 6 months in your savings account. But yeah, these days I would say have more because it has been a difficult market and businesses are not only adjusting to the overhiring that happened after the pandemic when they hired everybody back. They may not have been as forward looking as they should have been. They should have been a little more conservative in the things that, they were planning on doing and whatever. But I lost my train of thought besides that. But it's good to have that money there because when you know you have a safety net, when you're in an interview, it will help you not come across as desperate. If you come across as desperate, it gets read that way. It plays to the mindset of how people look at the jobs that they apply to. They may apply for something much, much lower. And then if you're desperate for that job, it gives a bad vibe to the employer, right?
You're totally right. You're totally right. Yeah. People can smell desperation.
Yeah.
And if you're in a tough spot financially. That's even come through.
Mm-hmm. And so that's another reason for keeping your skills up. If you have other things that you can do while you're looking, maybe sign up with some agencies, see if they have any contract work, any hourly work that you can do. That'll ease your mind while you're job hunting. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so much. It's a big deal. It really is a big deal, and I don't think people realize how big a deal it can be until it hits them. And there's lots of aspects to this job hunt thing that, you really need to take notice of and realize that, yes, this is something, looking for work is good, but you have to be in the right frame of mind to do it because you don't want to come into an interview and say, "Why did you leave your last work?" "Well, I hated my boss." No,
Right.
say, or that company really wasn't run well. You don't want to badmouth the person that clothed and fed you for 2 or 3 years. Why did you stay if it was so bad? That goes to other logic, but it speaks to your loyalty.
Right. Yeah.
So, you don't want to put bad stuff out there because it's gonna come back and bite you.
Sure. Sure.
Shame is a huge part of the layoff experience, but it's not often discussed. And even though you can say it's really the business's fault, and this on some intellectual level, shame can creep in, embarrassment can creep in. So, how do you encourage listeners to confront and release that shame?
Yeah. This is a slippery slope. It's very easy to feel that shame and embarrassment. And you're right. Logically, we can reason with ourselves and understand this was a budget exercise. It was no fault of my own. But emotionally, that takes some time. And this is where, you need to give yourself the time to process it. It's normal to feel the shame and embarrassment, but 40% of all Americans have been laid off at least once in their career. There were more layoffs in January of 2026 than there were since 2009. We're going through a period now where there are more people getting laid off than ever, and there are fewer jobs being created than ever. So you're not alone, and you probably know somebody that's been laid off. They may not be talking about it. The more that you can open up and share what you're going through with others, the more you'll find a community of support. And that community will help you understand that you're not alone and that you have resources and that they'll help you get through it. So that's kind of where, almost as like victims in the layoff, we take some sort of ownership on the experience. Where in reality, the only person that feels shame should feel shame and embarrassment is the company. The company made whatever mistake they made in over hiring, in not understanding the competitive landscape, in
Mhm.
not keeping up with technological advances, whatever it is. And their only kind of resort, their first and last resort, was to lay people off. They should be feeling like they've done something wrong, not the person that's on the receiving end.
Mhm.
So letting go of that is something that takes time, but it's a important step to getting to the other side and kind of taking the oxygen, taking the energy away from the experience that you've just had.
Yeah. One of the things we didn't talk about, I think I kind of skipped over my question, was the idea of meritocracy
Yeah.
during the layoff process. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's important.
Yeah, it is because, we think if I'm loyal, if I'm smart enough, if I work hard enough, if I put in long hours, I'll be rewarded, I'll be
Mhm.
protected.
Uh-huh.
That somehow then I'll get good performance reviews and that all of those things are going to protect us. But ultimately, when it comes to like push or shove and the company's doing this budget exercise and they see your salary on that Excel spreadsheet, you're a number that needs to get cut. And it doesn't really matter what kind of employee you've been. I've seen the employee of the year in January get laid off in July. I've seen the hardest working, most talented, most engaged employees get let go, and the most disengaged, subpar employees stay. And there's no rationale for that. And it's best also to not try and find any
Yeah,
rationale.
yeah, because you're not gonna know it, right? You're not gonna be
Yeah,
able to figure it out.
yeah. But we buy into this equation of if I'm smart enough and I work hard enough, everything will be okay. And when it comes down to it, sometimes that's not enough.
Yeah. One of the things that can help during a layoff is for it's the manner in which it's done. During the pandemic, I read a lot of things, I'm sure you do now too, about employment, employers, how they, laid people off, doing it in an email, doing it in a conference call. How impersonal,
Mhm,
how impersonal and rude to treat your employees that way.
mhm.
It's just bad news. And it shows a bit of cowardice on the side of the people that are doing it that way. They're just looking for the easiest way to do it when it should be, this individual has given you their work ethic, they've been loyal, they've helped you have whatever success they've contributed to it that you have had as a company, whatever their, you know, cog in the wheel was, it helped it move along, right? And they need to be treated with respect and kindness. And you should never be treated like you're a number. Never, ever, ever should you be treated like you're a number. And my advice to anyone who's listening is if you are treated as a number, you need to find another employer
Yeah, right.
because
Yeah.
you're not being recognized for who you are. First is an individual, second is a human being, and you deserve respect as such. So it just goes to the mindset of the employer if they did that. Anyway, let's talk about a story from the book where someone transformed their layoff into a turning point.
Oh gosh, I think about my story. That first layoff that I had in 2001, I was newly married. I was completely unprepared. I had no coping skills. I had no emotional framework. And I held a deep belief that hard work granted security, that experience that I had, though, of getting laid off really exposed this myth of meritocracy. It forced me to separate my identity from the job. And that shift changed how I navigated every layoff that followed and sort of became the foundation for this book. That idea of, gosh, what took me years to process after being on this journey and having multiple layoffs, kind of logging the 10,000 hours of feeling the grief of a layoff.
Mhm.
By the end of it, when I realized I was able to process that fourth and final layoff in just months, I realized that in terms of like transferable skills, others could benefit from the knowledge, my experience, the skills that I built, the guidelines, the practical roadmap of here's what you're going to feel, here's how to get through it. At the end of each chapter, there's exercises that somebody can follow and they can work on
I think that's excellent.
communicating to each of these stages. Yeah. So I hope that people find some solace, that they know that like they're not alone, that
Mhm.
people have gone through this and there are resources. The book is one of them. Fortunately, now there's more resources than ever. When I was laid off the first time in 2001, there really weren't any. There weren't really any books or support systems. There's a lot of support that people can find and invite people to reach out and find them because you're going to need all the help that you can get as you're in the job market trying to land your next job.
Yeah, and I would say too, with regard to resources, there are some that are associated with LinkedIn. There are groups on LinkedIn for people that are looking for work. I mean, those are some places you can join in and check in. But I would encourage you to find some groups that meet face to face.
Yeah.
Some face to face encourage, contact so that we do so much with our computers now. We just kind of think everything should be done that way because it's convenient. but you need some face-to-face. You need to develop some friendships. And who knows, in when you find those kinds of groups, and I think you can find some on Meetup, you
Uh,
know,
uh-huh.
whether there's different groups that may be associated with your church. There was a church, we're both in the Bay Area. There was a church in, I can't remember the name of it now, but it was in Tri-Valley area that had this big group that they had put together for people that were laid off and going through change. So, I mean, there's lots of resources around. You may not remember them. You may not have ever seen them because you didn't need them at the time. So, talk to people, find out what they're doing, what groups they may know of that you can join and be a part of, because it's good to have a camaraderie, to hear what other people are going through, learn what some of the changes and trends are that people are experiencing in the job search journey. And it's just good to have a friend. So
Sure.
you can unload on and they can unload on you, you know?
Yeah.
Because people that are working may not understand it if they've never been through it. So I would encourage people to do that. What do you hope your reader would carry with them long after finishing the book?
Um, the understanding that a layoff is a life disruption, it's not a personal failure,
Well, no.
that grief deserves to be processed, not rushed, and that when you take the time to heal, redefine your identity, and move forward with intention, you don't just recover from job loss, you build resilience that stays with you long after your next job title, company, or chapter.
Mhm,
Um, this is this is a big life disruption, and you need to pause. You need to give yourself the opportunity to process it.
mhm. I would encourage people to not just look for a job. You may not need to look for a job because you've got obligations, you've got kids and a mate, and you've life is going on. And I'm not saying not to do that, but when you are considering your pivot, consider a career that will work with some of the changes that are going on, some of these new technology, some of the new industries that are being formed. Look for something that's going to sustain you, and always keep the mindset that you need to be the one responsible for your learning, and making sure that you are keeping your skills updated, and don't get lax in that, because 5, 10 years down the road, even if it is that long, you'll need to figure out something again. And so take your time in figuring that out, and you will be all the better for it, because what you have decided upon will sustain you as a career for the rest of your working life. And that's what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So where can individuals find your book?
Any bookstore you can go to, they'll order the book. You could find it on Amazon. Might be a convenient way. Just go to the Layoff Journey. You could find it there. You can find me on the internet. My website is stevejaffe.com. You can learn more about me, the book. You can find my blog. You can download a free chapter of the book. So, and I'm happy to connect with people. If anybody wants to connect on LinkedIn, you can find me there as well.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, Steve, it has been my pleasure to
Thank
chat
you
with
so
you
much.
about this. It's such a timely topic, and so many people need every little bit of knowledge they can get about the journey of a layoff.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Take care. Okay, I'm going to describe someone, and I want to know if it reminds you of someone. Maybe you. You've been looking for a job for a while. You're a strong leader with years of experience, but your job search is stalled. You're frustrated. You're not getting interviews, or maybe you are getting interviews, and the interviews that you're receiving, you're not doing a good job in them. You walk away and they didn't go as you expected. Now, each time this happens, it chips away at your confidence. You're losing valuable time, and you're scared. Scared that you're going to have to settle for a job that's beneath your capabilities. If this is you, you need clarity. Now, if you want a resume and a LinkedIn profile that finally sound like you, that come across clear, confident, and differentiated. If you want to do if you want to do interviews where you can speak about your leadership, impact, and strengths without second guessing yourself. Or maybe you want recruiters reaching out because your positioning is sharp and compelling and draws them in. What about doing a job search that feels structured instead of scattered, strategic, and aligned with your goals? If you're ready for that kind of clarity, contact me on LinkedIn and put in the keyword clarity, and I'll reach out to you and we'll figure out what next steps are, okay? Now, I want to thank you for listening because your support's a blessing. Now, if you enjoyed the podcast, give us a positive rating on Apple. And remember, new podcasts are released every 2 weeks on the first and third Wednesdays. And share this with your friends, please. Now, before you go, let's speak victory over you. No matter what it feels like, you've got a bright future. Good breaks are looking for you, and new doors are about to open. But one thing you have to do is to believe it. Believe it, believe it, believe it. Now, until next time, take care.